Welcome back to 60 Plus Uncensored, the podcast where we dive into real talk about living, aging, and thriving with no filter. I'm your host, Seb Fry, and today I'm especially excited because we're joined by Alex Terrazas, PhD, the driving force behind the Cannabis Boomer podcast, a show that dives deep into the science, research, and real-world implications of cannabis use, especially among older adults. If you're curious about cannabis and aging, or simply want to better understand cannabis use and usage in the United States today, this is a great place to start. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hey Alex, thanks so much for joining me here today on 60 Plus Uncensored. Alex Terrazas isn't yet a household name, so for those of my listeners and viewers who haven't heard about you, could you give us a little introduction and explain who is Alex Terrazas and what are you all about?
Yes, so for the last 30 years, I've been working in psychology and neuroscience, trying to understand kind of how the mind and the brain work together. Area of computational neuroscience, so how does the brain compute your place? How do you recognize where you are and how to get from A to B in both humans and animals. Also worked at the NIH doing brain imaging research for a long time. Later went to work for Nielsen and invented satellite imaging market research and built a big company within a company at Nielsen. Then went back into the neuroscience field and retrained in robotics. There's quite a bit of overlap actually between neuroscience and robotics. And got into agricultural robotics. And most recently, I started the Cannabis Boomer podcast, where I try to explain the health implications, ramifications of cannabis use and aging, trying to emphasize safety, but also having some fun with it and understanding why older folks and people in general use cannabis and for what reasons. And I've released 13 episodes on that podcast. And I've also started one called the Cannabis Boomer Daily Feed, where I cover the latest news as well as review papers from cannabis research. And I'm excited to launch the Cannabis Boomer High Finance podcast. And I have a stock index that I am going to be reporting on. That will be in the style of kind of Kai Rizdal and Marketplace, if you're a fan of NPR.
Wow, that's quite a bit that you have going on there. So the Cannabis Boomer podcast. So what's all that about? You've had 13 episodes so far, pretty good. What are you guys talking about on the Cannabis Boomer podcast?
So generally, I try to get leading scientists in the area. So we did an episode on pain with a couple of PhDs, usually PhDs and MDs, but also people that can explain things in a good way. So we did pain. We've done an episode on the female orgasm disorder with a sexologist and orgasmologist. We have covered a lot of different topics like that. Coming up, we have an episode on migraine and cannabis, and then edibles, things like that. So we try to cover the gamut.
Well, it's pretty interesting. I mean, we certainly have seen a revolution in how America views cannabis. I mean, when I grew up, it was like, I don't know, the devil's lettuce, the evil weed, whatever it was, right? I mean, like, people were going to jail, prison for long sentences, right, for, relatively small quantities and whatnot, intent to distribute and all that stuff. And, I'm not even sure how it happened, but now we have, went from, during the pandemic, it was, cannabis shops were like an essential service, right? So that's quite the turnaround from how it used to be. Why do you think that is? Why have we seen such a sea change in the perception and regulation of cannabis here in the United States?
I think that people have used it so long and that, they finally realized that this war on drugs, at least with respect to cannabis, has been a big failure. So I think that people want to use it, and also a lot of medical applications. Multiple sclerosis, for example, helps a lot with the spasms and pain. And it's a very common system in the brain and in the body. So it's for real as a potential medicine. The problem has been. Oh, go ahead, Zeb.
Oh, I was just going to say that, like you say, yeah, people have been using it. People have been using it for millennia, right? I mean, it's not like a new thing. It's been around since, well, I don't know, since the Egyptians. I mean, didn't they find hash like in the, like maybe not hash, I don't know, but they found like marijuana in like ancient tombs, right? Going back, thousands of years. It's not like a new thing. So I wonder, I mean, I don't know. I mean, was it just to me, it's amazing to me what a difference just a few years has made in terms of, perception here. And the United States is actually far ahead. Like it's still criminalized in like France, right? And a lot of places that you think of being fairly, avant-garde, perhaps, and yet the United States seems to be pretty far out ahead of, many of its peer nations in respect to, the commercialization of cannabis.
Yes, and back in the 50s is when it got the stigma, and it was a racist thing, frankly. They called it marijuana. That's why I call it cannabis. There were all these names. Marijuana is a pejorative term, and so they used it really to round up brown and black people in many ways and to stigmatize them as doing something wrong. And there's now studies out that show that drinking and cannabis is healthier alternative to drinking and reduces opioid misuse in many states where it's been legalized. So it was a bad policy and racially driven, if you ask me.
Well, yeah. Plus, I mean, there was that movie Reefer Madness. You ever see Reefer Madness from the 1920s or whenever that was, right? But just as soon as they invented like talkie movies, right, they came out with Reefer Madness. And I mean, they talk about how like Richard Nixon used cannabis or marijuana, enforcement as a way to like, essentially squash political dissent, essentially.
Yes, absolutely. So I think those are the roots of this problem, and many people paid a heavy price. I know people have gone to jail for what we would consider very minor possession and intent to sell, but small amounts. So really a tragedy.
Yeah, so it sure has changed. And, so my wife likes watching like the Real Housewives of wherever, right? And all the housewives, like they're taking gummies and they're smoking weed all the time now, just like flagrantly, blatantly on mainstream television. And you see that even in, scripted series, right? I mean, like a lot of people, it's just become so normalized so quickly. It's really it just kind of blows my mind even today. And that we are now a number of years into this. So specifically for cannabis for old people, so one of the knocks that I hear about cannabis for, especially for old people, is that like it's really bad for people who have like hypertension, right? That it's associated with greater numbers of heart attacks or stroke or something like that. What does the actual data say about that?
There is definitely some risk in that regard. But for the most part, these are understudied problems because it's been illegal and it's been very hard to conduct science. And that's one reason it's somewhat hard to get the experts. There's just not that many people who have devoted their lives to studying that. There is a risk of bradycardia, tachycardia, a higher heart rate. But I think largely minor. And another problem is that a lot of the studies allow people to co-use cannabis plus tobacco. It's very hard to get a controlled study going where you can just look at the cannabis.
Okay, so
I should also mention there are many different kinds of cannabis, CBD, THC, dominant. So when you let people do things in the wild, they're using quite a bit of different strains and things like that.
So from a health perspective, I mean, generally speaking, I think that like inhaling burning carbon or whatever into your lungs is probably like not a good thing, right? Like, so my understanding is that cannabis has not been shown to be carcinogenic, but like it could cause like an emphysema or whatever. What do we know about that?
No, that is true. There are many acute short-term effects of cannabis, wheezing, but the studies on long-term lung damage are mixed at best. So they're not a smoking gun there, if you will, but certainly causes the wheezing, no question about that. A lot of different ways to take cannabis, not just smoking. I mean, you can certainly do the edibles. They have their own risks. There's tinctures that you can stick under your tongue that act pretty quickly and don't have some of those side effects.
Right. So how about like vaping, right? I mean, like, was one guy I met, like, I don't know, this is like just before the pandemic, I guess. And it was like a party, right? And he had like a little vape pen, right? And he just like took a little puff here and there, right? You know, and he's going like, man, this has totally revolutionized the way that I smoke weed, right? Because now, like, there's not a lot of smoke, there's not a lot of smell, right? Like it's, you know, you can take a little bit or like a lot or whatever. But is that better or worse than actually smoking it, or what can you tell us about vaping THC?
So under ideal conditions, yes, I would say it is better than smoking, but unfortunately a lot of heavy metals get into the mix and it can be very harmful too. So a lot of it has to do with the manufacturing of the pen and what's in the oil that they use in the vape pen. So it's not clear. And when I use a vape, I get kind of a high cough, wheezing. I don't find it pleasurable at all.
Okay, so but like now you mentioned heavy metals and you know manufacturers of pens, but like if you're buying from like a state licensed dispensary, one would assume that these products have been vetted and are quote unquote safe for use. Is that not true?
That is not true. When they do random shopping and test stuff off the shelf, they find quite different amounts of THC, but they also find pesticides, mold, a lot of things you wouldn't want in your system. And so they have these certificates of analysis that each product is supposed to have, and they do have them. They're required by law. But it turns out that the people who pay for the certificate analysis are the growers themselves. And so there's a lot of shopping around for the best test results, or they give like the quality stuff to the tester and then sell stuff presumably or ostensibly from the same batch, but it's not the same stuff that they sent to the testing. So it's a dirty little secret.
Oh, interesting. So, well, are there particular brands of vapes or whatever that are known to be, you know, quality products that don't have a lot of pesticides and heavy metals in them?
Yes, there are definitely good products out there, and I would encourage people to shop around for that. I can't, and I don't give recommendations of particular brands, but there certainly are some reputable brands out there, and those are the ones you should be going with.
And so, but brands are like, aren't they? I mean, they don't cross state lines, or do they? Can you ship like, can a grower in California ship like pre-rolls to Arizona, or is that not allowed? Is that drug trafficking across state lines, or what's the word on that?
That is true. So what the brands do is that they buy local and then do their branding on local product, say in the state of Arizona. There are brands that cross state lines, but they always get their products locally and then brand them there.
Oh, well, that's very interesting. Yeah, I really had no idea about any of that. So I heard that the Trump administration, bless their souls, they are working on reclassifying marijuana from a schedule, whatever it is, to whatever it is. What do you call that, right? Where it's like right now lumped in with heroin, and they're going to make it Schedule C or Class C or from Class B, or what can you tell us about that?
Right. So currently it's a Schedule 1 narcotic.
There you go.
Substance, right, Schedule 1 substance, and it has a lot of restrictions on it, and including, you know, doing the research that we were talking about earlier, and they want to potentially make it a Schedule 3, which would put it on with like hormones and different products, maybe even Tylenol, beyond that level. Unfortunately, that's not the panacea that people think it's going to be, because Once you do that, then every product that's sold in the stores is going to have to go through an FDA process. And that could be very burdensome. It depends on how they do it. It could make it illegal for people to grow their own, which is, I think, one of the best parts of the loosening of cannabis laws. So those are the kind of the downsides, for sure.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's the first I heard of that. So I've always heard that everyone was very excited that this would be happening, but yet it's a Schedule 1 right now, and it's openly sold in how many states is it legal in now? Like 34 or something like that?
For medical, yes, and I think 24 or something like that for recreational.
Yeah, so I mean, even though it's a Schedule 1 drug right now, it's blatantly sold, everywhere, seems like. And so how do they get away with that then? I mean, like, and then if they went to Schedule 3, what would that mean? Why would they still not just flagrantly violate the federal laws like they're doing right now, apparently?
Right. Well, I do have a podcast episode about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I have a lawyer who is a cannabis lawyer who really makes a good case for descheduling, which is to remove all the legal ramifications of it. It's pretty extreme, but I think that's what people really want. They don't realize what rescheduling to Schedule 3 would do. So it is interesting and counterintuitive that they might be able to crack down on sales of cannabis products when it becomes looser, but that seems to be what the lawyers think is going to happen.
Interesting. Well, is alcohol classified as on that schedule, or is alcohol not even on that schedule? Is it unscheduled?
It is unscheduled, and I think people that's what they want for cannabis, frankly, and some Democratic and a few Republican lawmakers have proposed descheduling. We'll see where that goes. It's a can of worms when you change that status.
Well, that's pretty amazing because, I mean, alcohol is actually a poison and it's very dangerous and kills. How many people every year get killed from alcohol? I mean, it's a very large number. And, well, I mean, like there's the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Is the ATF, are they the only people who like regulate alcohol?
There's a lot of state regulations, as I'm sure you're aware. If you go to certain parts of Pennsylvania or Texas, you have to go to a special store, and they're very hard to find. But you're right about alcohol. It's a very dangerous product, but it has a history in the United States and has always been kind of a favored product.
Yeah, I quit drinking during the pandemic. About 5 years ago, I quit drinking. And since then, I really have become aware of just how pervasive alcohol is, right? I mean, like it is everywhere, and it's, marketed as a very healthy. I mean, they make it look healthy because the people that they show are not, overweight drinkers in a lazy boy armchair, right? Like eating popcorn and watching football, right? I mean, they're always out and about. They're like, they're slender, they're attractive, they're clubbing, right, or whatever, right? And they really make it look like it's a fun, social, safe thing to do, and they package it up so that it looks just so great. And it's just hard to believe that is allowed to persist when it is in fact, so dangerous and addictive and cancer causing.
Absolutely. And obesity causing and other aspects of that. I'm sure it's a lot easier for you to keep weight off when you're not drinking.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that it is. Yeah. So, okay. So vaping, you're not so hot on. So what do you think what is the best way? I mean, like, is it a tincture? Is that the best way that like 60 plus people should be consuming marijuana or cannabis? Or what do you recommend? Gummies? I mean, that's what they do on the Real Housewives all the time. They're always eating gummies.
Right. So gummies, I think, would be the best way to go long term. The problem is people eat a gummy and then they don't feel anything, and then they go and eat another one, and then they end up in the ER department with a panic attack or some sort of problem from taking too much. So I recommend trying a tincture. I actually smoke a very small amount of cannabis because it's so potent these days. You really don't need to, if you're smoking a whole joint, you really are getting a lot. So these days, I mean, that's just me, but I think tinctures are a great way for people to have a controlled amount. It gets into the system in 15 minutes or so. It goes, under your tongue and into the oral mucosa, and so it gets in there, and then you feel it, and then you have a good feedback on whether you want a little more or that's enough. With edibles, people have a problem, but once you've determined what works for you, and let's say you're trying to treat pain, lower back pain. Once you get the tincture mix right, then it's a chronic problem. So in the morning you could kind of take that same mix of products and use it as an edible and do it that way.
Right. So, a lot of people are not actually in chronic pain, but there might be other reasons for them to take marijuana or cannabis other than for recreational purposes. So what are the other reasons? Is it like anxiety? Is it like an anti-anxiety? Or like aside from chronic pain issues, what are the other, and recreational purposes, what are the other reasons why one might consider a regimen of, somewhat regular cannabis usage?
So sleep is a big one. It doesn't work for me in that way. I tend to wake up a little bit after I get my initial sleep and I wake up and stay awake. There are maybe using edibles at that, before you go to sleep, that might have that long-lasting effect. I haven't found that to work. A lot of people do use it for sleep, and it brings on sleep, that's for sure. And then some people stay asleep. So, that's one, and they've shown that in rats and other animals, so it's pretty well studied. I had that discussion with Suzanne Mulvihill, PhD orgasmologist, who swears by cannabis as a treatment for female orgasmic disorder or difficulty, which affects about 40% of women worldwide. So it's a real thing, and actually even a larger percent are dissatisfied with their orgasms. Men don't seem to have that problem, but women do. And she says that if you get the right mix, so you got to hit the sweet spot, as it were. If you get that right amount, it can kind of free the mind from overthinking during that experience. And I found it a really fascinating interview with her. She's dedicated her life to treating her own female orgasmic disorder. She's lobbying states to include that as one of the medical reasons to prescribe cannabis. Very interesting person. So there's yet another one. And I would say migraine is another one, multiple sclerosis, and the what they call spasticity or muscle spasms seems to help a lot with that. We talked about anxiety. It can be anxiety provoking, but it can also be anxiety relaxing and get you off of the edge a little bit. So, and then I think a lot of people who use it recreationally might be using it for some sort of medical reason, let's call it. Some people say there's no recreational marijuana or cannabis, that it's really everybody's taking it for a reason, which is an interesting hypothesis.
You didn't mention glaucoma, man. That's like the old standby.
Oh, yeah, that's right. In fact, I'm just starting to work on an episode about cannabis and eye health because that's a really interesting one, yeah.
Right. Okay. So how about like microdosing, right? I mean, so I guess this microdosing is like a big thing right now. Like people are taking like people at Google and Apple are taking tiny little mushrooms and LSD even, right? Or MDMA right before they go to work. Just a little tiny bit. But people are also doing the same thing with marijuana, are they not? Or cannabis, are they not?
I do know that they are. I've never tried that myself. But I think it could be a good way to go with the edibles or whatnot, maybe even the tincture. So sure, I think the stuff is so strong now, you almost have to go with microdosing. I always thought it was megadosing, though. I was wrong about that.
Well, a little bit goes a long way, I guess you would say. So, how about like indica versus sativa, right? I mean, like there's some people who say like, oh, I never touch sativa. Oh, I only do indica, or there's like hybrids, right? I mean, like, what's all that about with the different strains?
Yeah, so there are. I mean, they look physically different if you look at the plants. Uh, and people always call indica couch, which means, it kind of relaxes you and makes you into a couch potato for a while. And some people may need that. I think a lot, the indica is definitely a strain, but I think people are now looking more at CBD versus sativa. And CBD seems to kind of mellow out the sativa, which can be anxiety provoking. So I think, and then there are other cannabinoids called CBN, CBG. Well, there's about 15 different ones at least, plus these terpenes, which are the components that give it that smell. And so all the combinations of those have different effects. There's one that's terpene plus CBD seems to be very relaxing, or CBN seems to be more sleep promoting. So it's a wild world out there, and the scientists are just getting started on it.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that it helps you. It helps with appetite. It's like a lot of people don't actually like they don't have much appetite, especially people who are really old, right? I mean, like as we get older, a lot of people aren't eating enough anymore, right? For whatever, I'm not really sure the reason why, but that is a fact that a lot of them start wasting away and they just don't eat very much anymore. So maybe if they were eating a lot of, gummies or whatever, they would want more ice cream after dinner or something like that. Low sugar ice cream, of course, naturally. So, okay, well, you mentioned CBD, right? So, I mean, there's THC is the active ingredient, supposedly, I guess, right, in cannabis. And then CBD is what exactly?
CBD is also acts on cannabinoid receptors, but less so in the brain, more in the body. But it does seem to maybe compete with the THC in the neuroreceptors, or at least kind of modulate the effect of the THC so that you don't have those panic attacks. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it's not very pleasant. I know some people have. I haven't. But I guess, they call it ratio products. So you want to get at least some CBD in with your THC. There's an arms race to go high THC all the time. And a lot of young people are taking these insane amounts of THC, which can be psychosis inducing too, which is a real risk. CBD seems to mellow it out. In fact, some people even suggest if you're having a sativa THC induced panic or bad experience, that you should smoke a CBD joint, and it would actually kind of make that better.
A CBD joint, what is that? They actually have like joints that don't have THC. They have CBD instead. I've never heard of that.
I believe they do, or at least high CBD content compared to THC. Yeah, that's a real thing. And then, of course, there's edible CBD that wouldn't work quite fast enough to stop your panic attack. But CBD also has a lot of other qualities to it that people in the wellness area might be interested in. Anti-inflammatory, different types of, they're just learning about a lot of different CBD benefits. And it definitely does not make you high, doesn't give you that anxiety. So from a wellness standpoint, I think CBD is the place people should be looking. I also did an episode on should you get your dog high? That wasn't the title, but we had a vet on who's the head of the Cannabis Veterinary Society. He's up in San Francisco, go figure. And he said that, for one thing, treating dermatitis, skin itching and inflammation, CBD oils work really well for humans and dogs that way. Cancer, some people believe that CBD can help with cancer or help you prevent cancer. some of these are wild speculations, but not on the part of this Dr. Gary Richter, who was the vet. He was very controlled, did his due diligence, and there are applications for CBD in particular in dogs. One of the interesting things is that dogs have about maybe 100 times the sensitivity of humans to THC. And so if a dog, yeah, I was surprised by that. And if a dog eats a THC cookie or something like that, which, hey, dogs do that, they can have a really strong reaction. It won't kill them, but it's certainly not good for them.
Right. Okay. So CBD though, like they sell like CBD what I want to say sodas or whatever, right? Or like CBD infused kombucha outside of like dispensaries. Do they not? I mean, like CBD is considered to be like a non-narcotic or whatever. I mean, is that true? Or am I just imagining that?
No, that is true. And one of the guests was talking about gas station CBD and that you should avoid that because it...
That and gas station burritos. So avoid those too.
That makes perfect sense. And a lot of the manufacturers and producers do not like the idea of selling these kinds of products just to the general public. CBD is pretty harmless. So I think, but it's got to be quality CBD. You can't just get that gas station burrito with the bad beans, as you say.
So people should go to a regular, this is being broadcast coast to coast, but here in California, like it's little green plus symbol, right? Like that's a licensed dispensary. And so that's where you should go to get your CBD products, you think? Or are there other places that are good to get them besides gas stations, of course?
Right. Well, I do think going to the dispensary is the way to go. The bud tenders aren't always knowledgeable, but many are. And so you really do need to go in with a plan of what you want to buy and kind of do a little bit of research ahead of time. Definitely, Target actually is starting to sell CBD cookies at a couple of their stores in Minneapolis.
Oh, really? Oh, that's very interesting. Well, winter is here, right? I mean, I got to get through it somehow, I guess, right? Yeah, so I don't know, like, where do you see this going? I mean, because like in Amsterdam, for example, who hasn't been to Amsterdam? They have like the smoke places where you can go, like you can smoke weed at like the Bulldog or whatever, right? We don't really have on-site consumption here in the United States like that. Is that something that's going to be coming around the corner, or we're never going to see that?
No, and we have them here in Arizona at least. Little places that you can go. Maybe it's next to the dispensary, and you can go in as a member, get a membership, and go in there and smoke. So we do have that. And I don't know what the rule is in California, but I do think that is a coming thing, especially since bars are down and cannabis is up. It seems to be a trend.
Yeah. So in Arizona right now, you're saying that you can get a membership to go to a members only lounge and just smoke marijuana with people that are also in the club?
Yes, exactly. Can completely do that.
But there's no tobacco allowed, or is there? Can you make blunts there, or what?
No, you can't do that. That always makes me laugh because I don't live in Santa Cruz anymore. But when I did live there, we'd see somebody smoking on the street and we'd go, "Oh my God, that person's smoking!" And then we say, "Oh, it's a joint. It's okay." So, but
right. Okay. So you think that the members thing is going to be like a coming feature, like the cannabis shops are themselves? I mean, because like I haven't really seen them anywhere. I've never been to Phoenix. I've been to Phoenix, but when I was like 13, a million years ago, so I've not been. Are you in Phoenix? Is that where you are? Where in Arizona are you?
I'm in Tucson.
Tucson, Arizona. Right. So is that common in Arizona? That kind of arrangement, or is that still fairly unusual?
I know of at least 2 or 3 places that'll do that legally, that allow you to go in and smoke legally. Also eat cookies, of course, or whatever you want to do there. So yes, but I don't know how common it is, but I do understand that it's going to be a growing industry. Maybe this is the time to buy a small shop and turn it in maybe a Sears Roebuck and end up at Capitola Mall and open up a smoking place.
That's probably a good idea. Yeah, I mean that's probably going to be happening. I can definitely see, I think, the writing on the wall, and also the writing on the wall is like alcohol, right? So like you're seeing, even though alcohol remains very popular, you're seeing like breweries go out of business, right? You're hearing that the wine growers are really struggling to sell their wine right now because there isn't that market. Because a lot of people are switching from alcohol to cannabis. Are there any kind of like national statistics available that actually have quantified this shift from alcohol, which is definitely a toxin and a poison, very risky, to something much safer like cannabis products, or has that not been studied yet?
I think it has been studied. I don't know the numbers, but from personal experience, I know younger people are definitely drinking less and consuming more cannabis. So I think you're looking at a trend. I don't know the numbers though.
Right. Yeah. So especially for people who are older, right? I mean, I think that, I mean, alcohol is so risky, and it. I mean, I understand that it has ties to dementia and Alzheimer's and certainly cancer and diabetes and all kinds of negative health connotations come with drinking. And so we touched on the issues with stroke and heart attack from cannabis use. You rightly pointed out that the studies have not been, very well documented, if there actually are any formal studies. And I don't think there really are, because it's still not allowed to be studied in a clinical sense in the United States because it's a Schedule I drug. Is that correct?
It's difficult to study. You have to get your cannabis supply from a particular, or maybe one or two now, growing facilities that are U.S. sanctioned. It's difficult to do the research for sure. And it's also difficult with getting good data as far as what people are using, if they're letting them do their own, smoke what they normally smoke, or use what they normally use. There's such a variety in how people take it. So the studies have not really been there. There's been no cut and dry answer to many of these questions.
Right. Well, I do see there's a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but like, some people, organizations, or whatever are, using fear, uncertainty, and doubt to scare people away from cannabis. Like you see these stories about people ending up in the ER, right? Because they're having panic attacks or like X, Y, and Z. What do you think about that? Is there like a coordinated effort, and who's doing it? Is Anheuser-Busch behind this campaign to vilify cannabis use?
Their beer is so crappy. I don't think they have any other choice. But I think actually the ER visits is well documented. That's a real thing. I mean, people are definitely showing up in ER visits, and a lot of it is because of the edibles in particular, and that inability to wait the right amount of time. So that's a real thing. And then of course the pets, vets will tell you that the pet cannabis over consumption is, they don't need to hardly take any anyways, but that's a real thing too. So the legalization has had some downsides as far as that goes, but I think that there are zero deaths or any long-term damage caused by cannabis unless you get behind the wheel of a car or do something stupid. But, as far as cannabis causing you to have a panic attack and die, that just doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah. So, meanwhile, alcohol deaths, I mean, how many of those are there every year? In the hundreds of thousands, I would imagine, right?
Yes.
I mean, from sclerosis of the liver, obviously, right? And all the other stupid things people do. I think that probably a lot of the lot of gun deaths are probably from people who've been drinking, right? Either suicide or murder or whatever, that kind of thing. I mean, I don't really know, but I would imagine that's the case because people make especially bad choices when they are drinking, right? And I was just talking to my wife the other day, yesterday actually, about this. I said, the problem with alcohol is that people, when they are drinking or drunk, they make really stupid choices. People who are stoned, they make silly choices.
Okay. No, you're absolutely right. In some states, many states, if you have a medical marijuana card, you can't own a gun. North Carolina is one of those states, which is a very pro-gun state. So the Supreme Court is actually being asked to consider whether they can make it illegal to own a gun if you admit to or have a medical license. Which is crazy, because that's about the only thing you can do to not own a gun in this country. So.
Well, you would think that like a conviction of like a DUI or something like that, because obviously you have a problem with alcohol then, right? I mean, to some degree, right? That would strip you of your gun rights, you would think. I mean, if you could get them stripped for having a medical marijuana card, I would think. Well, listen, let me ask you this. So let's say you're a senior and, you're over 60 and maybe for some reason you never tried marijuana before, right? And you see that a lot of people are doing it and, what's the best way to experiment with it, do you think? I mean, should you try it alone? Should you not try it alone? Should you what do you do? I mean, are there support groups? Are there meetups for boomers to get together and get baked or what?
They do have buses that go to retirement homes and take people to the cannabis dispensary. But I think the safe thing to do would be to try the tincture or try an edible and do what's called a 1-to-1 ratio, so equal amounts of CBD and THC. And then, don't do it and say, today is the day I'm going to get high. I think the thing to do, if that's what you want to do, but I think the thing to do is to take an edible, which is about 10 milligrams. Most states require that for a single edible. And to cut that in 25% of that, so 2.5 milligrams if you're not experienced. And then try that. Wait an hour and a half before you have anything else. Or wait till the next day. So I think the thing, and also know why you're using it, okay? So if you're trying to solve a pain problem, then go ahead and get something that is beneficial for pain. Do your shopping online and figure out what you want and why you want to use it. Document what you take and also document how it affected you. If you felt better, then you're on the right track. But if you felt weird, then you might want to adjust things. So I think it's an incremental thing. Don't think today I'm going to solve my pain or my sleep problems going to the store and that's it. The other thing people always say, the experts on my podcast always say, is that if you're taking it for pain, remember there's a lot of other ways to treat pain, and so don't think that taking cannabis is my program for pain, but as a part of your program for pain. Getting back to your question, though, I think you need to really start slow. You have to be careful, have somebody with you. They can even partake with you, but there's a risk of falling. A lot of people lose their balance. Older folks have a problem with that. Edibles can interfere with drugs that are processed in the liver, like blood pressure pills and anti-cholesterol medications, so you do have to be careful there. So you have to choose, and I think the tincture is probably the way to go for experimenting. You get a little eyedropper, you can take a very precise amount, stick it under your tongue, and 15 minutes later you'll know what it's doing.
So do you think that people who are on any kind of prescription medications should consult their doctor before they begin taking cannabis?
I mean, I say yes to that. However, a lot of doctors are negative on cannabis. A lot of them don't even know. It's getting better, but they do studies that show that physicians don't really understand all the ins and outs, and they have very little education about that in their medical school curricula. So be ready for a negative response from your physician. I wouldn't let that dissuade me. If you're firm enough to tell your physician, hey, this is what I'm doing, and I'm getting results, or I want to do it. Your physician is not God. You can do your own experimentation, but if they tell you, hey, you're taking medications that would be interfered with in the liver by edibles, then you might want to switch to something else like the tincture, or even smoking would be safer.
Right. Yeah. So, but I mean, doctors really. I mean, if I was run over by a bus, I would certainly go to a doctor. But like for nutrition, for example, right? I mean, doctors know very little about nutrition, right? You go to a hospital where people are recovering from grave illnesses, and they're eating crap, right? They're eating Jell-O and pudding pops and like all kinds of horrible stuff that they feed them in the hospital, right? So it's like, I don't know, if it's a place to get better, why are you basically poisoning them with their dietary choices? So are there certain kinds of doctors who are maybe more educated about safe cannabis use for older adults?
I think there are, for sure, doctors like that. Finding them is the challenge, and I know that some organizations are trying to make a registry of doctors who are educated in cannabis and that kind of thing. So, so I don't know what to tell you as far as that goes, finding a doctor who's sympathetic to that. Some advertise, but not many.
Right, yeah. I can see that might perhaps, like niching down into the cannabis-friendly doctor, you might end up losing a little business that way, I guess. So what got you started with this Boomer podcast thing? How did that come around? I mean, sorry, the Cannabis Boomer podcast.
Right. So, I was sitting around, this is about 4 months ago, and I saw a story about baby boomers becoming the fastest growing group of cannabis users in the country. And I thought, that's interesting. And I said, cannabis boomers. And so I went online to see if that website was taken, just because I was interested in that. And it was available, cannabisboomer.com. So I nabbed it. And then I thought, gosh, that'd make a great podcast. And, I do have the brain and psychology knowledge to do a good job with this. And so I started, got that first podcast episode going. It was quite a learning experience. And then it just became a labor of love. I've, been studying all the scientific literature, and this is a good way for me to kind of keep it fresh in my mind. I learned so much from my guests on all these different topics that we've covered a little bit today. So that's what got me started, and I've just been enjoying it very much. But my joke is that I really just want to write off all my weed purchases. We'll see if that flies. Yeah.
Right. Well, I bet you it would. So this is not tax or legal advice, of course. So what drives your own interest in cannabis? You seem like you're pretty into the cannabis, right? So what drives your own interest into the subject?
Well, back when I was a teenager, I used cannabis, and I have actually, for most of my life, used some cannabis. And so, and then I went through that whole neuroscience training and all the other stuff, but we never covered it just because we were studying other things. And so, I finally got curious about it. I was like, well, this is a real thing. I mean, scientists discovered receptors in the brain and in the body that respond to plant-based cannabinoids. You have your own endogenous cannabinoids floating around doing different things in your brain, and they're very common throughout the brain and body. And so it just became interesting to me.
So, you don't seem like you're, you seem like a pretty sharp guy, and one of the knocks against cannabis is that it makes you stupid, right? Say that, well, because you've been, teens, you're now, 62, right? So, that's 40, 50 years maybe almost that you've been using cannabis, and what do the studies show about long-term or even short-term cannabis use on like brain health development, memory, cognition, all that stuff. Is there any kind of reliable research into that?
Yeah, there's kind of pluses and minuses, if you will. I think there is some evidence of cognitive slowing, but this is a very small effect, and also so confounded with all the other things that people do along with cannabis. And so it's not like, anybody's just done a study where they took some poor person and put them in a room and had them smoke cannabis there for 40 years and see how they came out. And of course, there's no control for that. Maybe you could get some twins, and have one smoke cannabis and one not. I don't know. But you can't do a study like that. And so the research is very difficult to do. The effects are very small. Some people take cannabis and they work out, and there's a benefit to that. So I think that the effect is small, if at all.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, then you have like Snoop Dogg, right? He's been smoking weed as long as you, maybe, right? He seems to be doing okay, and now he's even turned Martha Stewart onto it, right? So she is like, isn't she like 80 or something like that? I mean, Martha Stewart's getting up there in years, right? I mean, she looks great.
Yeah, I want those two on my podcast, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. And Willie Nelson. Well, Willie Nelson.
And Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
Well, he stopped smoking, but I understand he still consumes like gummies or whatever.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah. No, I heard he stopped smoking, and that Woody Harrelson supposedly stopped smoking too, but apparently that was just like a publicity stunt or something like that. Apparently he's still quite the smoker, right? I mean, I'm not sure about Paul McCartney, right? But well, he was kind of a lifelong smoker too. I don't really know what he's up to these days. I think so. That's my understanding. I don't know. What do I know? I don't know very much. All right. Well, listen, Alex, we kind of got to begin wrapping things up here. But before we do, Mike is yours, man. What do you want to talk about that we haven't talked about so far?
Well, I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the other things I'm working on. I am currently working on cannabis and agricultural robotics, and hoping to launch a business there. So always looking for people who are interested in that. I'm going to just keep going with this Cannabis Boomer podcast and the two related podcasts. Like I say, it's a labor of love. I hope people will listen. Had some pretty good results with it. So those are just the things that I'm into right now. And then, I'm fixing up an old adobe house in Tucson. So that's me.
So you say cannabis and robotics, you say? Like robots to like prune cannabis plants? Is that what we're talking about here, or what?
Yes. So I have been working on this for a couple of years. It's a very tough problem. But, they hire a lot of people to go in there with little scissors and trim up those buds to make them look pretty. You don't, and I guess the stuff they trim off is not as strong as the buds themselves. But it's the one thing that slows down the whole process and really ups the cost of producing the cannabis. So that is one. And then, doing maintenance in the field or in the greenhouse, checking the health of the plants. All these things can be done by robots, and I think they can do a great job of it. So I would like to do that. And also, I just love robots. So what can I do? What can I say?
So are there actual robots today who do that kind of thing, or do they do that for any other thing, like, I don't know, blackberries or tomatoes or something like that? Or is this the next big thing in agricultural tech?
Yes, and I just submitted a grant to the National Science Foundation for my agricultural robotics, non-cannabis. And so they've gotten pretty good at picking strawberries. And, there's, with all the anti-immigrant sentiment and shipping people across the border, there's a labor shortage, and this is going to be lasting for years. Americans won't do that job. Even when we had immigrants doing these jobs, we still had a labor shortage in the ag field. So So there's a need for it. And there are a lot of different plants. The grant I submitted to the National Science Foundation is about chili peppers in New Mexico. That will be the plant that we use for this. And the idea is to actually generate artificial plants in virtual reality to train robots that do all their learning in virtual reality. So you have a virtual robot that looks like your real robot. You turn it loose in virtual reality, and my system would produce infinite number of, let's call them chili pepper plants, with a lot of different variety of configurations, and put environmental effects like different lighting, wind, all of those kinds of things into the environment. And then the robot can sit there and practice and fail and practice and fail and do it on a massively parallel basis with 10,000 robots and 10,000 different environments. You can make the environment look however you have your fields look, in little rows or vertically, doesn't matter. And so then they practice there, and then they have to try to do it in the real world and relearn that problem solving setup. And hopefully, this is called the sim to real gap. This is what makes a lot of artificial data fail. But yeah, that's the basic idea.
Well, I have to ask, were you stoned when you came up with that idea?
Probably.
All right. Well, sounds like a great idea to me. All right, well, listen, Alex, thank you so much for your time. If people want to get a hold of you to talk about cannabis or robotics or any other cool stuff that you're into, what's the best way they can get a hold of you?
You can send me an email to cannabisboomer@gmail.com. I like that. And I also have the cannabisboomer.com website, which is currently being fixed. But just get in touch with either way.
All right, terrific. Well, Alex, thank you so very much for joining me here today on 60 Plus Uncensored. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I suspect that many of our viewers and listeners will get something out of it as well. So thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you on the flip side.
Seb, thank you very much. Great to talk to you.
All right, well, that's a wrap for this episode of 60 Plus Uncensored. Huge thanks to Alex Terazas for setting the tone with such honesty and insight. Now, if you like this episode, do me a favor, do Alex a favor, hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and share it with someone you know who needs to hear it. Oh, and by the way, if you know anyone over 60 who's still out there doing big things, living boldly, working with purpose, or aging on their own terms, I would love to hear from you. Reach out at team60plus.com or join the conversation at 60 Plus Uncensored on Reddit. I'm Seb Fry, and this is 60 Plus Uncensored, because as we're learning, life after 60 isn't the end, it's just getting good.
Subscribe now.